In today's video, I'll be telling you my character concepts for two of my favourite Marvel villains, White Queen, also known as Emma Frost, and Mr. Sinister. First up is White Queen, who I'll probably be calling Emma Frost, but she would be called White Queen in the game. And she would be a strategist with 250 HP as well as two forms. In her normal form, her left click would be telepathic intrusion. It would be a hit scan kind of instant attack. And she'd raise a hand to the side of her head and attack the mind of the enemy she's looking at, which would basically just mean she'd do damage if her reticle thingy or she was looking at an enemy, basically. Her right click ability would be wardrobe change, and it would have a 5-second cooldown shared between her two forms. So when you're in your normal form, this would change into your diamond form. Her E ability would be very interesting, and you'd target an enemy, and for the next few seconds, they'd see all other characters as their character model and as if they were on their team, and they would not be able to see how much time they had their cooldowns. So this would be best used in a group scenario where there's loads of people around, because if it's just them and they're facing off against you and some of your allies, they'd know that all of you guys are enemies. But yeah, so it can easily confuse your opponent. Her left shift would be a bit more basic, with her turning herself invisible for a few seconds, and then also granting, while she was invisible, granting her nearby allies damage reduction, as she mentally protected them, and then influenced your enemy's perception so that they didn't see her. Finally, her ultimate, which would also be on a shared percentage for both forms. So in her normal form, her ultimate is, "You have so much potential, darling," where basically the target ally gains their ultimate, and for the next few seconds, their cooldowns are halved. Now onto her diamond form, where she'd gain a new passive, Unbreakable, which means she takes reduced damage when under half health. Her left click would be a basic punch, but slightly more powerful than a normal melee, and her right click would just change her back into a normal form, and as I said earlier, would have a shared cooldown. When she used her E ability, she would basically swoop an arm in a backhand, which would do damage and also knock back to any enemies she hit, and would have a 6-second cooldown. And then a slightly more complicated one is Moving the Pawns, which has a 7-second cooldown, gives her some shield health, and also all allies across the map gain a speed boost if they're moving towards her. When she used her ultimate, she would dash forward a short distance, and if she hit an enemy, she'd grab them and slam them into the ground, dealing high damage to them and also stunning them for a short while. And if it's eliminated the enemy, all your allies will gain a temporary damage boost. And in her diamond form, she'd also have a team ability where Iron Man would shoot a Unibeam at her. Basically, she'd kind of use it when he'd be able to respond, and if he did, he'd kind of turn towards her and shoot a Unibeam at her, which would then refract through her body and shoot beams of light/energy off in all directions. Overall, she'd probably be a very high skill tier character, because if you can manage her cooldowns and shifting between forms, you'd be able to do a lot with her. She would thrive in large team fights, especially in her normal form, because her allies could provide the damage output that she lacks, while also her abilities like warp perception and shield mind just being more effective. And in her diamond form, she'd just be a bit more, she'd be harder to kill, but would do a bit more damage, but still it'd be useful to have your allies around you, hence moving the pawns, making it easier for allies to come and help you. And now for a potentially even more complex character. So Mr. Sinister would be a strategist with 250 HP like Emma Frost, but his kind of gameplay revolve around him collecting DNA. And his passive would just basically be, in your spawn room, there'd be 3 cloning vats, which are kind of big tubes full of green liquid, which you often see Mr. Sinister with them. And when you collect DNA, we'll get to that later, it'd go to either an empty vat or a vat with DNA of the same kind. If you collected DNA and there's no of them, it'd just go nowhere. And when there's 3 or more DNA samples of a character in one vat, then a clone of that character would appear inside that vat. And we'll get to what that clone does later. His left cloak would be a basic energy projectile, and his right cloak would be called Amorphous Body. And when you hold it, his body kind of shifts, especially around the middle. You might not mean if you see an X-Men animated series, but basically, while he was holding this, he'd be able to use it as much as he wanted. It would reduce the damage he took, probably by more than half, but then he wouldn't be able to use any attacks or abilities. So it'd just be a good escape tool. His E ability would be how he could extract DNA samples, and basically he'd need to be near a dead body, and hold E to kind of channel it for 2 seconds, and when he did that, the kind of animation would be him kneeling down, putting a syringe in somebody, and extracting some blood from standing up. And then the sample would be sent straight to the cloning vats. And then if he's close to a cloning vat with a full clone and he was kind of targeting it, say range being just in your spawn room, you look at your vat, then you could click F in order to awaken the clone. So the vat would kind of swing open, the liquid would just kind of pour out and go away, and the clone would step out, and then your consciousness would move into the clone. It would just look like the character it's a clone of, and act like them, but it'd have a glowing diamond over its head, only 75% of their health, but they would be able to gain ultimate charge quicker. And then basically you just play as that character with those slight changes, but when you die, it would only give an assist, not a kill. The body would just disappear instantly, and there'd be no respawn time as your consciousness would just go back to your normal body. Then Mr. Sinister's left shift is a bit more basic, so basically he pulls a customized ray gun out of his pocket, and shoots a red energy bolt, and if it hits an enemy for a few seconds, 3 maybe, they are slowed and do less damage. Also, the bolt would just damage them. When he used his ultimate, Genetic Overload, he'd just inject himself with a concoction of lots of different DNA, and his kind of muscles would inflate, he'd grow slightly in size, and his abilities would all change. With his left click becoming a high damage melee, his right click summoning a force field bubble that could protect you and also nearby allies, then if enemies got inside it, they could damage you. His E resurrecting a nearby ally, but you'd have to spend 2 DNA samples of that character, and his left shift unleashing a wave of destructive energy that could destroy terrain. Since I don't know how team up abilities fully work at the time of this recording, I'd give Mr. Sinister one, which would actually be able to work with any character, but basically he'd just extract 3 DNA samples from them. So if you had an empty cloning vat or just some of their DNA, you'd just get a clone of them ready. However, to balance it, I would make it to damage the ally that you're extracting the DNA from. So Mr. Sinister would have a low to average damage output, but with a good self-defense mechanism in his right click, and a quite powerful ultimate, which just kind of gives him a whole new moveset and helps him actually do combat a bit more. But his main thing would be his cloning gimmick, which was, lets him create clones of allies and enemies alike, but he'd have to rely on them dying, with the exception of his team-up ability. And then with a clone, he could have 3 different ones stored up, and then when he needs one, just grab it and take over, and then just get the ultimate quicker, so it would be very unpredictable when fighting him. However, in order to get the samples, it would be quite hard. I hope you've enjoyed this fairly long video, at least in comparison to my other ones, and this should be coming out on the day that the closed alpha test starts, so I'm not sure who I'll do next and if I'll do them, or when I'll next make a character, because I'll just be watching some streams and learning more about the game in order to try and improve my character concepts. There are some characters people have asked me to do, and drop ideas in the comments. And if you've enjoyed this and you haven't already, you could always go and check out the other videos I've done, linked in the description probably. Have a good day. Ta-ta.